first define the problem. What kind of predators are out there for deer? You have coyotes, you have black bears for the most part. Southeast, coyotes, black bears, some bobcats. You get up to the Midwest, coyotes. Up in the upper Midwest where we're at, you got black bears, you have timber wolves, gray wolves, and you get to the west where Mark Kaiser's at, and what do you have? Coyotes, mountain lions, coyotes. See the common thread there? Coyotes. So when we're talking about predation on whitetails, it's almost always fawns and fawn survival. So when you look at it that way, what do we have? Well, let's start in the Northeast and work our way across the country. Northeast, what do you have? You have coyotes, you have black bears for the most part. Southeast, coyotes, black bears, some bobcats. You get up to the Midwest, coyotes. Up in the upper Midwest where we're at, you got black bears, you have timber wolves, gray wolves, you have black bears. And you get to the west where Mark Kaiser's at, and what do you have? Coyotes, mountain lions, coyotes. See the common thread there? Coyotes. And that's what we're often talking about when trying to control a predator population for whitetails, is specifically managing coyote populations. So remember what I said to first start this episode. We try to control everything. And with coyotes, we try to control their populations. But let's back up for a second first. Do we really need to control those populations, and will it have any effect on the whitetail population? The one thing you need to understand is if you're living in an area with coyote predation on fawns, chances are you're living in an area that has a high deer density and a high productivity rate. Those things are often overshadowed because they're complicated. It's complex science when you're looking at productivity rates, especially among whitetails and in different parts of the country. Now, if you get into it and you talk to a biologist, they will actually give you numbers for productivity rate and what they call is a fawning rate for particular does. And when we talk about that, it's does of fawn-bearing age. A good area where I'm at is 0.6. So what they say, 0.6 fawns per doe. So what does that mean? That's a half of a fawn per doe on average is how many fawns are actually going to survive to their first birthday. That doesn't mean that these does aren't having twins, because they normally are, but only half of them are surviving. A 0.6 to a 0.9 productivity rate is actually really good, no matter where you're at. That's telling me that you have a really good deer population. It tells me that you have good habitat, and it tells me that those does are finding enough fawning cover to raise those fawns to their first birthday. What's killing all those fawns? What's killing the 0.4 to 0.6 fawns that aren't making it? It's all these predators that we talk about.
Coming up next.
Based on what we've seen in the research, you have to remove a significant portion of a predator population on an area before we start to even see marginal and much less substantial improvements in what we're often looking for, which is fawn survival, which leads to recruitment, which leads to population growth.
Okay, so now we're going to peel off more layers on this topic. When we're talking about managing predators, specifically coyotes, what people ask me, should I trap them or should I hunt them? Hands down answer, trap them. Trapping is by far the single best tool in predator management for coyotes, raccoons, whatever you're trying to, if you're trying to protect turkey poults, if you're trying to protect deer, trapping is going to do a lot more good, especially Midwest, upper Midwest, Northeast, Southeast. If you don't know how to trap and you have buddies who are good trappers, if you don't have somebody like that, find one. Find a good trapper. That's going to help you out. Then people say, well, Dan, what about, does that mean I shouldn't shoot coyotes? I shouldn't go predator hunting? No, that doesn't mean that at all.
Because, let's face it, coyote hunting is fun. There's nothing quite like the feeling you get when you're sitting in a tree stand waiting for that nice big buck to walk out. And then after a few hours, you see something move. And yep, it's a coyote.
All right, let's see what happens.
What would you do?
So yeah, I've heard a lot of times hunters say, and myself included, that when you're out on a deer hunt and you see a coyote, it immediately turns into a coyote hunt. And like I said, I've done that personally. I've turned several deer hunts into coyote hunts, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the question is, does the research support that, for instance, another saying that I've oftentimes heard, that for every coyote that you kill, that's one more fawn. And the truth is that it doesn't necessarily. Based on what we've seen in the research, you have to remove a significant portion of a predator population on an area before you start to even see marginal and much less substantial improvements in what we're often looking for, which is fawn survival, which leads to recruitment, which leads to population growth. So how much of the population are we talking about? Sometimes it takes removal of up to 80%. Say if we're talking about coyotes, 80% of the coyote population in a given area before we start to see improvements in fawn recruitment rates. And that's most easily accomplished oftentimes through trapping, very intensive trapping efforts, probably focused primarily on the time period of year when fawns are dropping on the property that you're managing. And the reason that that trapping effort needs to focus on that time period of the year is because we've seen through recent research also that coyotes very quickly fill back in on properties where territories are vacated. And in the past, a lot of times, both as biologists and as deer hunters, we think that the mechanism by which coyote populations recover following, let's say, intensive shooting, intensive hunting, or intensive trapping is by compensatory reproduction. You shoot a bunch of them, their reproductive rates go up, and the population recovers the next year. But what we're finding through GPS tracking of coyotes is that it doesn't take a whole year for that population to respond following population reduction by trapping or hunting, but rather it can happen in a matter of weeks. And the way that that occurs is through immigration of new individuals who previously did not have territories coming into that area. So basically, we don't even have to go through an entire reproductive cycle for coyotes to repopulate an area, because we have numbers of individuals in the surrounding areas that are looking for territories to occupy. And when those territories become vacant, they quickly fill back in, leading to a rebound in the coyote population almost immediately following the reduction in that population.
And for the most part, that's true. But I disagree with a lot of biologists on this point, because I think the individual landowner, the individual hunter, can definitely have an effect. And the example that I often use here, and it might be a simplistic one, but it's no different than me trapping chipmunks in my vegetable garden in summer. Now think about that. I know you do the same thing. When you're killing chipmunks, they're not eating your strawberries, right? And it's affecting your property. Is it affecting the 60 acres around you of woods? No, it's not. But in your little micro area, it is. You can definitely affect or improve fawn productivity rates on your land with a little work on predator management. And here's the last thing about it. If you're gonna undertake this exercise in predator management, especially for coyotes, you have to understand that it's a never-ending exercise. It's not like we're gonna go out, we're gonna shoot a bunch of coyotes, we're gonna trap a bunch of coyotes, and our work here is done. No. Just like that chipmunk example, next year there's gonna be a lot more chipmunks. I still have to have my traps, I still have to do my due diligence and wake up every morning and go check them. If I want to have strawberries, if I want to have tomatoes, if I want to have more deer, I don't think that the coyotes are going to decimate my deer herd. It does in some areas, but if I want to have more deer, if I want to have more turkeys, if I want to have more quail, if I want to have more rabbits, predator management has to be a tool that's always in your toolbox.
Coming up next, Mark Kaiser gets a chance to go solo on a guided hunt for mule deer in Prairie Ridge, South Dakota.
As a native of South Dakota, I'm always glad to go home and hunt. I know that state like the back of my hand. Now, I love hunting in Wyoming, Montana, Kansas, Iowa, and I can draw a tag. But South Dakota has that special feel. Judd had a plan when I arrived. We weren't just going to DIY it. We had a guide. Leon Kills Small. Isn't that a great name? We told him he should change it though to Leon Kills Big, and that would probably garner him a lot more marketing effort as a guide. But Leon was perfect. He knew the reservation inside and out. He knew where the deer were living, he knew where the whitetails were living, and he knew where the mule deer were living. We could go in pursuit of either species with this tag, and we had the full run of tribal ground in southwest South Dakota. We needed to find a mature buck. Didn't matter if he was a giant or whatnot. I was going to be happy with any mature older buck that I could find and make a good stalk on. And that buck showed up right at the break of dawn. In the headlights, a mule deer buck ran across the road with a bunch of does. And that buck was one we figured we had seen before. He was old, brawny, had good mass, but he had all the characteristics of an older mule deer. Leon dropped me off at a trailhead, off on against some tribal land, and then said, Mark, do what you gotta do. Take off after this deer, I'll take Judd, we'll go hunt some other country, we'll meet up later in the morning. That was perfect for me. I like to be low profile, solo and on my own. You can kind of keep a smaller, slimmer profile when you're crawling through the grass. And this was going to be a grass hunt. It was going to be a sniper hunt. I figured the deer had went up and over into this little draw. And when I got there, nothing. I looked off to my right and there were whitetail bucks rutting on a doe, but no mule deer bucks. That's when, well, my cameraman helped me out a bit. He saw a mule deer butt a little farther to our left. I raised up above the grass just enough to spot this doe. Then I dropped back down. I didn't want to get seen, and I had enough terrain to make another big move to get closer to see if that was the entire group and if the buck was with them. The next time I crawled for maybe 50, 60 yards on my hands and knees and finally peeked up. That's when I went into real sniper mode. I got as low as I could on my belly, pushing my rifle ahead of me, finally getting enough vantage point where I figured I could raise up the rifle on my bipods and make a good shot. Oh, they're moving. Jump the fence. That's how they do it on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Nice warrior. Big box squared rack, look at that. Good forks. He's kind of crabby, but actually these forks are bigger than I thought. And this curved brow, that is cool too. But look at the body on these mule deer. These prairie mule deer, they winter hard, but they are some bruisers. They don't do the migratory trek like Rocky Mountain mule deer. They're more of a, I'll just go over here, maybe over there, stay here, stay there. And the neck on this guy, whew, it's fun coming back to your home state. You know, I live in a mule deer mecca in Wyoming, but even in Wyoming, I hunt whitetails and mule deer, and that's exactly what we're doing here. In fact, right before we finished the stalk on this deer, there's a whitetail buck literally 300 yards over this hill on a hot doe, and two other bucks are sitting guard, and any of them would be nice trophies on any hunt. Where's Leon, our guide?
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by Okay, so we're talking about bow hunting today, especially equipment. And this is one of the biggest mysteries for a lot of bow hunters. The arrow. Should I be shooting carbon or should I be shooting aluminum? Or both? I'll get to that in a minute. Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, you can kill a deer with a carbon arrow or aluminum arrow or a wood arrow out of older bows. It's really personal preference. And the differences between carbon and aluminum basically come down to what type of bow hunter are you. Carbon arrows are great, and they really became popular because they're higher, bigger diameters, and they fly really, really fast because they're lighter. That became really popular with 3D shooters especially. That bigger shaft, faster arrow, much less error that you're gonna have there. You can shoot farther distances. I know guys that shoot really high speeds that can shoot one pin out to 40 yards. Aluminum arrow is a little bit heavier, but the benefits there are more kinetic energy. The balance between both worlds, and that's the reason why I shoot this particular arrow. This is the Easton Fmj full metal jacket. It combines the best of both carbon and aluminum. There's a carbon core inside this arrow wrapped with an aluminum shaft. You'd say, why would you do that? Well, carbon core is going to add strength and weight to that arrow, and the aluminum makes it straighter. There is nothing straighter in archery than an aluminum arrow. So the differences is better accuracy, longer range kinetic energy, and more force on whitetails. And we're going to talk about that again in another topic, but for the most part, when you're thinking about arrows, carbon or aluminum, pick one that suits you and your shooting style, and you're going to be a much happier bow hunter.
Rental cars. Man, you just don't know what's been going on inside here. And you probably don't want to know either. But luckily, I've got Scent Killer No Zone. This product here, it's ozone free. But it's not just a spray on exterior products and parts of vehicles or backpacks or whatever. It actually is an unscented spray that works as an air and space deodorizer. And I'm not talking outer space here. We're talking the space like what's going on inside this car. Somebody could have been smoking in here, eating pizza, who knows? But with Scent Killer No Zone, an ozone-free product, I can just do some sweeping motions, spray in here, woof, I'm ready to go hunting. And all my gear going in there is not gonna get the particles on it either from whatever's been going on in here. Now, this isn't just for vehicles only, although I'm gonna use it heavily on this rental car. It's also good for the interior backpacks, maybe your luggage bag you wanna spray in. And what about when you get to hunting camp? That hunting lodge, that tent, that cabin, you know, the one with the old musty odor, it smells like there's 3 or 4 dead mice in there. This will work on that too. Plus, any of your closets where you store things. So I'm gonna start deodorizing with my Scent Killer No Zone and hopefully get this car ready to go for my next hunt. Now, you can try it too. And if you do need to spray down products, then go with the Scent Killer Gold. That's my favorite.